till the 1st of September, there were 4 killing frosts in the summertime. There was a record snowstorm in June, and so it virtually destroyed all of the crops in New England. The reason, incidentally, for this terrible weather pattern was apparently the great volcano in a small island off the coast of Indonesia. A huge volcano there erupted, blowing about 4,000 feet off the top of a mountain, putting into the atmosphere 25 cubic miles of debris. And so the Smiths and everybody else's crops were ruined that summer, and many of them, including the Smith family, sought greener pastures by moving to a more mild climate, which in this case was to New York and Pennsylvania.
Joseph's father had gone to Palmyra, set up a place for the family to be, and sent the wagon and the teamster. But Lucy says this man actually turned out to be, in her words, an unprincipled wretch. And he was drinking, spending the money for their trip on himself. And to cap it, Joseph, who was lame, as he uses that term, he was off crutches by now, but not far off crutches, he was forced to walk in the snow because Caleb Howard had actually fraternized with another family coming along the way and taken Joseph's place on the wagon with a couple of young women that he wanted to talk to.
Howard drove me from the wagon and made me travel in my weak state through the snow 40 miles per day for several days, during which time I suffered the most excruciating weariness and pain. And all this that Mr. Howard might enjoy the society of 2 of Mr. Gates' daughters, which he took on the wagon where I should have rode. And this he continued to do day after day through the journey. And when my brothers remonstrated with Mr. Howard for his treatment to me, he would knock them down with the butt of his whip.
On the final stage of the trip, Lucy dismissed this unprincipled teamster, Mr. Howard. He was going to leave with her team and her wagon, and she called a group of people who were there at the tavern and dismissed him and said he was a thief and she would need his services no longer. And Lucy arranged to have Joseph travel with an accompanying family, and he was going to be on their sled. And somehow, in a very vindictive mood, somebody hit Joseph and knocked him into the snow. And Joseph said he was left wallowing in his own blood until a stranger picked him up and took him to Palmyra. When they reunited in Palmyra, Lucy has a very touching picture of the children surrounding their father, weeping and embracing him, and the reuniting of the family. The family was the strength of the prophet. The family was called, as well as the prophet, to bring about the restoration of the gospel.
The town of Palmyra that the Smiths found as they immigrated from Vermont was a prosperous town. It had a population of probably nearly 2,500 and a lot of thriving businesses. One of the reasons Palmyra was thriving was that it was right on the route that had been mapped out for the building of the Erie Canal. The Erie Canal would connect the Hudson River in the east with Lake Erie in the west, be 363 miles long, and go right through Palmyra. So this was a very promising place. The canal was a mixed blessing, however, because it brought with it a lot of unsavory characters, some working on the canal, some there in other capacities, but some people referred to it as the Big Ditch of Iniquity.
When the Smith family arrived in Palmyra, early 1817, when the family was all together, they sat down and considered what they ought to do for the future to make a living. And they determined that they would go into farming. They found this piece down just over the town line in Manchester that seemingly spoke to them. And I say spoke to them because it had the resources to bless their lives. For example, it had the oak, which would be needed for coopering work. It had willows along the year-round stream that flowed through the property for hoop material. Cattails for gasket kind of material, for headers, for barrels, etc. It had gentle sloping land for orchard. It had good soil and good land for wheat, corn, all those crops that folks raised at the time, buckwheat, rye, pumpkins, etc. At the time of moving down to the town line and anticipating that they would purchase the 100 acres, they built a log home prior to moving from the village. The log home was about 50 feet or so inside of the town line on the Palmyra side. It was a 2-room structure on the main level, the kitchen, and then a room they called the best room. In time, they would add a little wing to the rear of the home, constructed of sawn slabs that they acquired at a sawmill. It looks like that they built this little bedroom wing in preparation for the birth of little Lucy, the last of their children, which would bring the family to Mother and Father Smith and 9 children. Upstairs, there was a garret, a half-story structure that you would go up to that level via a steep stairway. 2 bedrooms up there, 1 for the boys and 1 for the girls. Although cramped quarters, it was a snug, comfortable dwelling for the Smith family.
The Smiths spent long days constructing this home and establishing this farm. Digging out tree stumps and plowing the land consumed much of their time as they struggled to reach financial security and worked hard to assure it. Although economic stability was a major concern for the Smiths, it was their continued search for the truth, their quest, that proved of eternal significance.
Between the time Father Smith was born and Lucy Smith, his bride-to-be, the American Revolution began in Massachusetts. And with the American Revolution, the country changes from an agrarian economy to an industrialized kind of an economy. And for many people, that means opportunity and wealth and possibilities. And for the Smith family, that seems to always be the case. They're always on the verge of making it, and yet never quite getting there, one setback after another. And new freedom, strangely, produces not only liberation and opportunity, but also new anxieties. And the proliferation of churches with the American Revolution and the early years of the Republic can be seen as a manifestation of this. Ministers were concerned that as the frontier expanded, people would move away from churches, both geographically and spiritually. And as a result, new ministers and new methods were being tried, and it was a time of religious upheaval, great awakening. In fact, some historians call it a second great awakening.
Joseph Smith grew up during the greatest revival in the history of the world. He was living in a land of liberty. He was living in a land where there were more unchurched people than in any other Christian land. He was living in a land of multiple faiths. And the churches that grew during that period were the churches that solved the problem created by the Western expansion. These were the Methodists, the Baptists, and the Presbyterians. So large numbers of people were like Joseph Smith. They were concerned, they were converted, and they asked the question, which church should I join?
Lucy Mack Smith, Joseph's mother, wrote a history of her family, which is dominated by 2 major themes. It's clear that they were preoccupied with how they were going to get ahead, how they were going to pay their bills in this new economy that brought all kinds of hardships and challenges. And it's also clear that they were preoccupied with spirituality, how they were going to be saved, what church they should participate with, who had the true gospel as written in the New Testament. Joseph Smith, of course, comes of age. He becomes a young man. He grows from about 10 to 12 years of age while they live in Palmyra. And he says that it's about this time that his mind becomes seriously impressed on the subject of religion.
At about the age of 12 years, my mind became seriously impressed with regard to the all-important concern